right, so here we are, chapter 16-ish. I noticed that in your book, it was a lot on school counseling, which is excellent, but we needed to pull some counselor information in there also. So some of this stuff you will not find in your book, which is completely okay. All right. So chapter 16-ish, laws, ethics, and standards. So starting off with legal foundations of assessment of evaluations, we have IDEA, Individuals with Disability Education Act. We have HIPAA, Privacy and Security of Healthcare Data and Test Results. And remember, HIPAA, not HIPPO, right? So HIPAA, not HIPPA. That's just a little mnemonic I tell myself. That way I remember how to spell HIPAA. And then ADA is the reasonable accommodations for individuals with disabilities. So starting off with IDEA is it's more than a special education service. There's 6 principles that guide it, and it talks about how schools assess and support students. So regardless if you're going into school counseling or not, you're going to have a client that may ask you about this, whether they have a child in there or you're working with a child and you want to help advocate for their needs. It's important to know this. So the 6 pillars of this is first, free and appropriate education, right? We should be providing that. Schools should be providing that for their students. Appropriate assessments, an individualized education program or an IEP, and that is a federal document that states exactly how the schools and teachers are expected to support the children. The least restrictive environment for the student, right? So they should have access to everything that they can have access to, just like the other students in the room. Collaborative governance, that means that when decisions are made about the student, the parent caregiver is included in that. And then procedural safeguards are in place to protect the student. So that's the law side of it. Ethically, we have principles that are covered in our ACA Code of Ethics, right? I'm looking here, there is 13 sections. This is an entire, Section E, Evaluation, Assessment, and Interpretation, and 13 subsections under that in our ACA Code of Ethics. And ultimately, here's some of the rules or takeaways from that. So we want to protect our clients' well-being. We have to provide informed consent, reasonable incentives if we are going to offer incentives. For example, when dissertations are done, sometimes they need people to participate in their surveys. So they'll say, if I get 100 people to complete this survey, then I'll raffle off a gift card, right? We wouldn't do that with our clients like day to day, like here, take this assessment and I'll give you a gift card. But that's what that's talking about. Anonymity, meaning they can take the assessment and they don't have to identify who they are if you're doing group assessments. Confidentiality, the results that are accrued will not be shared. You'll report responsibly, sharing that information with whomever you choose to, or whoever the client chooses to, I should say. Use appropriate assessment tools. So we're going to use an assessment that is for an adult on an adult, not a child. Ensure psychometric soundness, which you have all gained the ability to do that. So we're going to look at it. Is it reliable? Is it valid? Right? Is there any test bias? Is it fair? And then always conduct meaningful assessments. Don't conduct an assessment because you're nosy bones, right? We're not going to do that. We're going to conduct an assessment because we want to know how to best help the client. So just to touch really quickly and briefly on this, client rights and informed consent is hugely important. It should be popular, important when doing assessment. So not only do you tell the client their rights and get their informed consent when you're starting treatment, but you also want to let them know their rights and informed consent when you're doing an assessment. And just so you know that when we complete the assessment, the results will be put into your chart, and that chart is then accessible by whoever you give me consent to share it with. So I just want you to be aware, right? And so the purpose there, right, you have to look at the purpose of the test, you share it, because they deserve to understand why that test is occurring. So you tell them, why are we testing? What will we find, right? Privacy, right? We're telling them who's going to see these scores, who's going to see these results. And then feedback, clients have the right to an explanation of their results in plain language. That's why we talked about like percentile and percentage and how to read the assessments in order to give it to them in plain language. Now, here's something that's very important. Samuel Messick, he argued that validity includes consequences, right? It's consequential validity. Validity includes consequences. So yes, we should worry about construct validity. Is the construct valid? And does the test do what it's supposed to do? But let's not forget why we're using the test in the first place, right? We're using it to actively or to work to actively better our clients' lives through the use. However, it possesses some consequential or it possesses low consequential validity. Okay, so as counselors, we can't simply ask if an intake score reflects anxiety. We must evaluate the real world consequences of labeling that client then. So if you can think for a moment with me, can an assessment cause harm? Right? A valid assessment, right? We get all this information, but can it still cause harm? Absolutely. Think about an ADHD diagnosis. That can be limiting, right? College admissions testing, right? If you don't test high enough on that introductory or that math test, you're in an introductory math class, right? Any fitness for duty evaluations with the military or police officers, and then substance use screenings, right? Those can definitely cause harm. Okay, so switching over to this MSJCC framework, it reminds us that an assessment is an action. So we move from, using this framework, we move from awareness of our bias, that video you watched in chapter 15, to knowledge of the client and trying to understand their worldview, and then finally to the skill of choosing the culturally appropriate right tool or interventions. So let's jump into some cultural considerations here. We have the case that I'm showing you here is the viral vulnerability. So here we have Benito, who is Bad Bunny. You guys know him as Bad Bunny. He comes to you. He's seeking help for performance anxiety. He's a native Spanish speaker, fluent in English. And the counselor decides, I'm going to use a standard English personality inventory. So there's already a problem there, right? There's performance anxiety, and we're looking at a personality inventory, and it's all in English, a standard English personality inventory. So what are 3 risk points regarding language and culture? What are 3 things we have to consider, right, in helping this client? So here's 3 risk points that I identified. So translation, right? The literal translation versus the cultural equivalence. Are they always equal? Right? Not necessarily. So does the concept also exist similarly, right, in both of the cultures or not? Whatever you're looking at. Right? Anxiety, that can be represented differently in different cultures. Context. He's identified as a global icon. Well, how does his fame interact with these standard personality norms, right? If you think of histrionic, right, and you know, this I love attention attitude, right? Maybe that's not him, but it would align with that if you're looking at him from that fame position. If you're looking at him on stage, maybe then, right? And then the decision to use the English test defensible, right? Can you defend why you chose to use that assessment? And what caveats would you write when you're writing your note to defend that? Right? Just something to think about. Most of the assessments that you guys are studying and looking at are available in other languages. So we would always look at, is there you're a native Spanish speaker, is that assessment available in Spanish? Right? Typically it is. So say it's not, and you're like, I don't know, what else can I do? There are some alternatives, right, in assessments. So you can use a culture fair test. So if a client has low test familiarity, we can use this nonverbal measure, right? Raven's Matrices has a bunch of options, and that can reduce the linguistic demand, like the requirement on them to do a lot of reading. And so you see there, it's just pictures, and they can align with that. What would be next in that series? Dynamic assessment is really fun. I consider it the pre-test and the post-test. So I'm going to teach you something, or I'm going to test you on something that you have no knowledge of. And then I'm going to teach it to you. And then I'm going to test you afterwards to see, okay, what is your potential for learning information? And then not just cultures, right? But disability comes with any learning disability, any physical disability, whatever, what may have you. And then age is also a disability that we're going to touch on really quickly. So with disability, it's important that we have accommodations. And all accommodations do is they change how that test is given without changing what it's measuring, right? So either we extend time, right? You have 50% more time to take this assessment, or we give it in a larger font, or, right, there's tons of options for that. And then when we talk about age, so we also have to account for giving an assessment to a child, right? Do they have the attention span? What is their linguistic ability, right? For older clients, we have to factor in fatigue, right? They're getting tired. We can't give them an hour-long assessment if they're, taking medication that makes them sleepy, or factor in if they're tired or what may have you. So it's important that we take these into consideration when we're looking at assessments. So you can choose to stop here if you like. We got through all of the information for the chapter, but I do have some rapid fire case studies that I figured I would flip through, even though we're not having class, because maybe you'll find a little quiz helpful. So let's start off with this. A counselor emails assessment results through an unsecured email. Are we talking about IDEA, HIPAA, or ADA? Which one of these applies here? HIPAA, right? And you can always pause, figure it out, and then hit play. A school refuses extra time despite there being a documented disability. IDEA, HIPAA, or ADA, right? Well, here it could be IDEA or ADA. 16-year-old completes a depression assessment in counseling. The parent calls and asks for information. I want access to all of that. What are we risking here? Confidentiality, informed consent, or minor rights? Well, we're talking about confidentiality here, right? Now, the child is underage, so typically what we would do is we would have a conversation with the child first, talk to them. Hey, your parents are asking for this. Let's figure out the best way to do it. But ultimately, as a minor, we have to involve them in that discussion. A counselor administers an ADHD assessment designed for children to a 45-year-old adult because it is the only instrument available. Reasonable accommodation, appropriate assessment tools, or procedural safeguards. Right here, we're having a problem with the appropriate assessment tools. A counselor posts online, I just administered an anxiety assessment today, and the results were shocking. Consequential validity, universal design, or confidentiality. I think here we're messing with confidentiality. A counselor considers exaggerating a diagnosis so that insurance will then pay for treatment. Is that responsible reporting? Differential item functioning? Or this is the insurance's problem? We have a duty and obligation to report responsibly. So responsible reporting. An employer requests a complete psychological report after an applicant signs a release without reading the release. Right? Is that construct validity, informed consent, or item response theory? Well, in this case, it's informed consent because we have an ethical obligation to make sure that the clients know what they're signing, right? We go over that with them. We don't just hand them a paper and they sign and we take it back, right? We have to let them know. We have to have dialogue about that. Right, a counselor verbally translates to help out, verbally translates an English assessment into a Spanish during testing. That's nice, right? They're going to read that for them. Is that an issue with HIPAA, IDEA, or psychometric soundness? It's actually an issue with psychometric soundness because now we could be changing any inflection on any of the words could change the whole soundness, right? It could change the reception of what is being assessed, right? So if I said 3 plus 4, is that equal to 7, 3, or 2? You see how it changes that? And lastly, a professor projects a student's assessment report as an example without getting their permission. Is that HIPAA, differential item functioning, or confidentiality, right? Well, if the assessment report is on any health-related information, then it's HIPAA. If it's not, then it's confidentiality, right? We want to be careful not to violate our clients' confidentiality. So, excellent work. Great job. Have a wonderful week. See you next week.